Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name's Sandy Sorleen. I am a contractor at the Fairmount Waterworks in Philadelphia. Fairmount Waterworks is the education arm of the Philadelphia Water Department. And I am also a photographer of landscapes and the built environment. And today I'm going to talk about a project I'm nearing the end of, at least the photography portion of it, hoping it'll be a book. And it has many titles, so this is the title that's in your program. But as I've been working more on the project, I'm finding that the dam sites of the Schuylkill navigation are not as fascinating visually or even subject matter-wise as some of the other sites. And so I'm including locks, aqueducts, canal beds, lock tenders' houses, and so forth. And so this is another possible title that's more encompassing. And I don't have to get a picture of every one of the 32 dam sites, because in some cases that's pretty difficult. Not that I wouldn't do something difficult, but. So forgive me, I've never used one of these before. I may be making odd dance movements here. So this statement speaks to me. Notice on the right there the date, 1897. This is from the New York Times. And it was about 10 years after the upper part of the Schuylkill navigation system was closed down, and they were no longer bringing coal barges, any other boats through that part of the system. So this quote is talking about between Port Clinton, and this is always going to be Pennsylvania. Of course, all of the Schuylkill is in Pennsylvania. So any town that I mention, PA. So between Port Clinton and Schuylkill Haven is where they're talking about. It says, "The artist in quest of studies in picturesque decay will be well repaid the time and trouble spent in a pedestrian trip along the towpath of the Schuylkill Canal between Port Clinton and Schuylkill Haven, Pennsylvania. The walls of the canal locks are crumbling, and the massive gates used in locking boats to and from the headwaters of the Schuylkill River are rapidly decaying and are covered with moss or have been shattered by repeated floods, and the canal bed, dams, and portions of the river in this locality are filled with weedy growths." This is only 10 years after it closed. It's already. And this is today. So this is in this area that they're talking about, Auburn. And the locks, in many cases, were so well built that the structures are still there, but indeed covered with weedy growths, which I find very attractive as an artist. And another. Okay. Just quickly how I came to this project. I learned how to row on my native Schuylkill River finally in my 50s, so not that long ago. And you can do it too, amazingly. Bachelor's Barge Club and a couple other clubs in Boathouse Row, and then other boathouses up the river behind our remaining navigation dams do allow amateurs to come and learn how to row. So I ended up buying myself an open water shell that's very, very stable, so I could go out in the winter. And so I could take a little camera with me and so forth, and my little binoculars. So I'm not really a racer. But this is looking over the stern, and I started taking pictures over the stern of my rowing shell of the landscape that I was falling in love with finally. Even though I grew up in Gulf Mills, about a mile from the river, I lived in Philadelphia all my adult life, very close to the Schuylkill. I'm half a mile from the Manioc Canal, where I've been living for 25 years. I didn't really fall in love with the river until I was out in it. And I think some of you who know Cherry Town, she has said the same thing. She's a much better rower than I ever could be. So, but getting out onto the water, and those of you who are involved in maybe in the trails or any recreation on the Schuylkill, you know, this is one of the things, maybe the most direct thing that makes people really care about their waterway is to engage it with recreation. And we'll find throughout this talk that there are maybe competing goods and competing desires in terms of, the Schuylkill navigation, dams, and those sites, and the canals like this. So the purpose of the Schuylkill navigation. You may have heard it called Schuylkill navigation. You may have heard the term the Schuylkill Canal for this system, which is a misnomer really because it's a series of shorter canals combined with slackwater pools to tame the Schuylkill River, which at the time construction began in 1816, so we're in the 200th anniversary years of its construction right now. And it was intended to tame this river that was shallow and rocky for navigation. There was a side benefit of water power, but that wasn't the primary impetus at first. So when we're looking at where our coal fields are, you can see that in the headwaters of the Schuylkill. So there's Pottsville, which is very close to the source of the Schuylkill, that the largest, richest anthracite veins actually in the country are there. And so once they figured out that you could actually burn it, I brought a piece in case no one, you can pass this anthracite coal around, and you see it's pretty hard. You can't draw with it, it's really hard. So it took a long time for people to realize that it actually would burn and would burn for a long time, and so it was very desirable. You can see from the map that mid-century, mid-19th century, that canals were, the canal era in the United States was the early 19th century. So until the railroads started competing and outperforming canals. Okay, this is the profile of the entire Schuylkill navigation system. And I also brought a poster of it if anybody wants to get close to it afterwards and take a look. Because do we have any canal geeks here? Anybody a canal geek yet? Well, maybe I'll make you one. But this is fascinating, and it's great to look at up close. So it's showing you the drop, 618 feet from the head of the navigation in 1828. It officially opened in 1825, but they extended it a little bit up to Port Carbon, which is above Pottsville. Ooh, it went without me meaning to, let's see. Yeah. Down to Fairmount, to Tidewater, below the Fairmount Dam. And once coal could be brought, and other goods could be brought below Fairmount Dam, then it's open water. The Delaware is undammed. It's open water to get up to the Delaware and Raritan Canal and get goods over to New York City, or out to open water, and to other ports up and down, of course, the Port of Philadelphia. So this lists the locks, all the dams, distances between them. This was extremely helpful to me when I was trying to find the sites. Because if I found one site, the mileage is extremely precise, and that would really help me know if what I was looking at was part of the next site. And just a close-up so you can kind of see a little bit more. The yellow being a canal and the black being a pool. So if you're familiar with Fairmount and where Boathouse Row is, that's the beginning of the Fairmount Pool. It's 5.67 miles long of navigable water. And then above that, the Manioc Canal and so forth. And then these are lock numbers. At one time, there were more locks than that. So I am measuring by lock sites. So there's 62 lock sites. But in some cases, there were 2, 3, even up to 5 locks at one site.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just to make sure I understand it. So the slackwater pool is just simply the open water in between? Oh, there you go.
Excellent timing. She had known people are going to be confused in advance. So,
Never mind.
so a slackwater pool, yes, is the water that is impounded behind a dam. So this is the Flat Rock Dam, Lower Marion, Philadelphia. This side, I'm standing in Philadelphia. And so you see how a dam will raise the level of the river and create a pool that's calmer than what's below the dam and calmer than what was there before, is the idea. The impounding of water is also useful for water supply. So we are actually using the Fairmount Pool in Philadelphia as a reservoir for our drinking water. There are 2 drinking water intakes in it. And it enables you to draw water out of the center, which would be the cleaner water, rather than the top or the bottom, if you have a deeper reservoir. So that's a slackwater pool. This is the head of a canal reach, which is a section of a canal system, and dam number 31 out of 32. And this is an older picture of the same place, and there's some weird angles in the dam there that we don't have anymore. It's been rebuilt since then, but otherwise similar looking site. I don't carry that guy around with me with the black hat. They always have him. Another example of a slackwater pool. This is at the Kernsville Desilting Dam. This was not a dam that was built as part of the whole Schuylkill navigation system. It was built as part of the cleanup of the Schuylkill navigation system of the Schuylkill River, and actually the burying of most of the system in the 1940s and 1950s. So last year, how many of you heard Cherry give her talk about that cleanup, the Schuylkill River project? Okay, great. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat too much of that information. I'll have a little bit as we go along. But this dam is still here, but it wasn't built. It wasn't completed until 1950. But there's its slackwater pool, and there used to be a navigation dam that went right about here, the Blue Mountain Dam. Okay, this is a canal. I think most of you would know what that is. And so that's the Manioc Canal looking north from the new wonderful trail that goes over the Manioc Railroad Bridge and the Schuylkill River. And it's showing how when the canal was cut, it created this island. This one might show better. Oh, there we go. This, there, okay. And this is the same canal looking south. The canal cut by hand, 1819 it opened, created what was called Venice Island, and we are to assume that it was named Venice Island because it had a canal, because we can't find any other reason. There's no family named Venice that lived in Manioc. Yeah. So again, Schuylkill River. In Manioc, anybody from Manioc or the area? I am now, but what we call the towpath here. You'll commonly hear this, the Manioc Towpath, this and that is happening on the Manioc Towpath. Wasn't actually the towpath was here, historically. So this is now, Norfolk and Southern is actually still using this track to deliver, pick up goods in and out of a paper container mill that's still on Venice Island. But it was not an island before, they cut that and created one. So, and again, we have canal, towpath, river, and that's typically how the Schuylkill Navigation Company, it was a private company that built the system, they would try as much as possible to have the towpath be between the canal and the river. So that helps us identify, what we're looking at when we're out in the field. When you see a depression, it's all dry and full of weedy growths, and you go, could that be the canal route? And then if you can figure out where the towpath is, the river, and so forth, it helps. What a lock is, and I'm actually going to show you a little animation that shows how it works, because that's a question I also get a lot is, how does the lock work anyway? But looking at the historic photographs is super helpful in finding the remains now many of which are really almost buried, or all you can see are these capstones. But sometimes you find, a stairway like that, the kind of stone that was used, the Pennsylvania brownstone. But anyway, this is Fairmount Dam. You can see the two levels. This is the level of the water that would be equal to behind the dam, and the boat needs to get down below the dam, and it's going to be going through that chamber. Lock tender's house, toll house. Sorry, the best way to do this. This is in Montclair, across from Phoenixville, and the Black Rock Dam is there, and we have the only restored working lock in the whole system. If you haven't been here, it's pretty cool. It's a great site, a nice little park, and the third Sunday of each month at 3 o'clock, I believe, they will open it and maybe even let you help, get people to push on those levers and open it, see how it works. Lock tender's house, restored. And looking upriver, that was looking downriver. This is looking upriver. You can see it's starting to silt in a bit, but this is the only section of the whole 108-mile system that is watered, meaning has water in it, but this is the only one that has water that comes from the river. So Manioc and a bunch of other sections I've found have water in them, but it may be seasonal, it may be all stormwater, and maybe even coming from stormwater drains. I want a clicker. Okay. One of the things I want to show you is areas that our parks are nicely restored, have interpretive signage, and parts of the system that do not at all and are almost inaccessible, or that require trespassing or asking permission, whichever comes first. And so, answering the question, what is an aqueduct? This is carrying water over something. So the aqueducts of the Schuylkill navigation are carrying water over creeks. So this is the Allegheny Creek, and it's turning and coming under this. This is the canal, currently watered by stormwater only, and then the depression from the canal bed continuing. And I got a lot of help in this area, the Garrard Canal being a 22-mile section in the middle. You can see it on the map, the long yellow area, where there are no dams in this 22-mile area, just locks and aqueducts to account for the change in elevation. But they didn't want to be in the river in this particular area for some reason. Okay. Okay. And why is this important? Why should we care about the Schuylkill navigation? I mean, some of these things are very obvious, our industrial history. It drove urban development. It's the reason we have compact, walkable towns where we have them. Is because they were near the canals, near the dams and the canals that went around them. And that translated into water power, delivery of goods and services, export of goods and services, and so forth. And so now you're looking at, Philadelphia, Manioc, Conshohocken, Phoenixville, Reading, and so forth, that these places are coming back now as walkable communities, but that form is largely due in that particular place because of 19th century commerce. But these two are this back. Anyway, okay, inspiration, very important, because this system actually opened 3 months before the Erie Canal and is much less famous, of course. I mean, one reason being it's shorter, but and it's not in New York, but you know, it was pioneering. You know, it was a pioneering system in many ways, and so quite inspiring in terms of, you know, what can you build, a 108-mile system with all these components, complicated engineering by hand. And the second inspiration being what Cherry was talking about last year in her keynote, the cleanup of the damage done by this system, the unintended consequences of taming the river, how these towns I just spoke of brought pollution, how the dams allowed coal waste to pile up behind them that had to be dredged out. And you know, we can look back and say, well, before the Schuylkill River project in the mid-20th century, this river ran literally black from accounts that we read, or, you know, almost old enough to remember that. And the Schuylkill was not someplace people thought of kindly or wanted to live near, and it smelled bad, and it had 0 fish in the lower Schuylkill. Today we have 50 species, according to extreme Philly fishing. 50 plus species have been identified by them. So, you know, good news. And all this is translating into, you know, could these be Schuylkill River Trail destinations and waypoints? And many of them are already. So my question is, can we get more of them? I found some incredible sites that sort of nobody knows, you know, nobody could get to, except for the bushwhacking trespassers. So, of course, the Schuylkill River Trail, I guess Tim was holding up this earlier, this fantastic new Schuylkill River water trail. That's the river itself. And actually, they do go into the Oaks Canal. They do use the lock. Has anybody done the Schuylkill River Sojourn? Did you go through the lock? That's great. So the Schuylkill River Trail, the water trail, and the circuit, which is all the multi-use trails in quite a large portion of our region, 750 miles are working on of these trails, starting to connect in more and more places. And how can we, the people that are coming to this is paralleling the trail, or sometimes it is the trail. Sometimes the trail is where the canal was. And so how can we, you know, connect all that? All right, quick lock lesson. Watch the level of the water from top to bottom in each slide. So they let the boat go, they let the mules go forward and let the boat drift into the lock chamber, and then they're going to close that lower gate, and you see the water level hasn't changed yet. They're going to close that lower gate, and then notice here where the water is coming in from above, sluices are opening to let water in to raise that level until it gets up to the level of where you want to go. And reattach it to the mule, and the mules are nudged into action, and there you go. All right. It helped me to understand how a lock worked, because I'm not an engineer. I didn't understand how a lock worked exactly, and the various components. So along with looking at the historic photographs, I was able to identify some places that may have been a little more difficult. This is that Kernsville area that I showed earlier. This dam actually came down in 1926. It didn't come down as part of the cleanup. It came down because the Reading Railroad wanted to change the course of the Schuylkill River so that they wouldn't have to build so many bridges in that area. So, and then 1950, the Kernsville Dam, just a little bit lower. It's right about here. Buried. I mean, if there were any remains of this dam, they're underwater now. So, this is the upper lock chamber. You can see some of the machinery. That's that lock, the outside of that lock. And when I photographed this, I didn't know what I was looking at. This was when I was just doing photographs of along the banks of the Schuylkill before I had really homed in on, I'm going to do the Schuylkill navigation. So this is visual. You know, I'm attracted to ruins. I'm attracted to, you know, what we're losing in the built environment. I didn't know what the ruin was. I was attracted to the reflections, all of that. Later I go back and go, oh, that's the outside of, you know, lock 28 and 29. And this is the only black and white picture I have in the presentation, but I finally did figure out how to get to the point where you could be in the lock, which this used to be water, of course. During the cleanup in the 20th century, the river was dredged. That dam below here, Kernsville, was built purposely to allow coal waste and other sediment to pile up behind it so that they could dredge it out and recycle it. And but then a lot of earth was moved around to create impounding basins, and a lot of the locks just got filled and buried, and the canals got filled and buried. But these landscapes are fascinating to me because they're so surreal. Finding the sites, it helps to, you know, just sort of orient yourself based on some of the big towns that are along the Schuylkill. And these maps were very helpful. The again, probably around 1890. Well, that one has a date on it. 1890. I can't read it. Something. Really helpful. Shows all the dams, their numbers, all the locks, their numbers. It has some roads that are still there to help you get to them, you know, and the names of the towns and so on. So I make good use of those. Another example. This is near here. The Vincent Dam ruin is there now, and then sometimes they would use the canals to do a shortcut, you know, cut off an oxbow. Okay, and this is 1913 studies were done. Also very helpful with every factory building. This was Conshohocken, and it's different now. And the canal is covered over. Washington Street is most of the canal. But on the right side of the image, that's Plymouth Dam, which has been taken down also. Dam number 30. And this has been a big help. Anybody, if you become a canal geek or you just want to read about the history of the area, this is published 1989. I got a hold of Stuart. I said, do you want to come out and show me where some of these are? But he's an expert on the 22-mile Garrard Canal section. And he documented, including in photographs, every structure that he could find. He just followed the canal route through the woods and so forth and across highways. And, it's tremendous. So here's the link for that, so you can get that off of his whole dissertation. Very interesting. And so he's been going out with me for that. All the other ones I'm doing by myself, which maybe isn't the safest thing, but so far so good. And Stuart has been going out with me in the Garrard Canal. So we have 4 left. And should we keep them, I wonder? This is from the final report, 1951, where they're talking about what dams are going to be left. It's not quite right. I don't know why they don't have flat rock there, because that's still there. And then, of course, since then, Felix, Vincent, and Plymouth have been dismantled. So that gives you your 4. So I'll just show you quick pictures of those 4 dams. Black Rock and the head of the Oaks Reach. There's a fishway on the other side of Black Rock Dam. There's a fishway at all 4 navigation dams now. That means the American shad and the other anadromous fishes that need to migrate upstream in order to spawn can go almost 100 miles before they hit the Kernsville desilting dam, which does not have a fishway. And so they're getting stocked. The American shad is getting stocked out of Reading, and they're tagging them and finding that they are returning to their same. They come back to their same spawning grounds. Norristown with this fishway. These plaques say this. Jeez. didn't even touch it. Okay.
That goes when you don't want it.
Yeah. Oh well.
Don't try for those arrows, just swipe your finger.
Yeah, that wasn't working so well either before, but I'll try. Okay. All right. Norristown Dam, and this is showing the altitude and how deep the water is, you know, when it comes up to one set of numbers and the other. This is actually the altitude, which shows up on that profile. Flat Rock Dam. And their fishway, looking from the Lower Marion side. So you can go in and look into that fishway from, you can park at Flat Rock Park and walk up and look into that fishway. April, May, early June, you can look down and see some fish going through if we don't have another flood that blocks it up. And then this is after a storm, so it doesn't always look that wild, but there's a fair amount. Okay, I'm going to go fairly quickly through photographs I've been taking. And some of the sites, I'll point out which ones are more, already have some recognition and are accessible. This does have a sign. But this is where the navigation began. This was head of navigation. The mighty Schuylkill is there on the right. It's about 10, 11 miles down from the source at Tuscarora Springs. This is Mill Creek. And they had dam number 1 just a little bit below this, and a boat basin where they would load up the coal from the nearby mines. I'm pretty sure this is dam number 2 site from a bunch of different readings. Coal, dust this is what happened during dredging. You know, there's culm, which is a coal silt. The coal waste is called culm, and that's in the water, and it's being carried by the river. In fact, they found it as far down, like up the Delaware. It was carried down the Schuylkill and even up the Delaware a little bit. You know, just flowing out. It just got everywhere. And there's some timbers in here. I don't know if you can see it in the photograph there, but I think that's dam number 2. Dam number 7. Still something there, I think. You know, it was hard to tell exactly what's under there, but these are not. Last year at this Congress, I went to the American Rivers session on dam removal. I don't know if anybody went to that one. And I asked, you know, we had 28 dams removed. How come they're not listed on your dam removal site? And she said, well, they have to be really removed all the way like to bedrock. They have to be out of there. And so they were being left partially in many cases. So we only have the 21st century dam removals listed as removals, because I guess they did go all the way down. The canal cut across this part of Schuylkill Haven, creating an island at the time. And there's just a little bit of the depression left. The rest is filled in for fields. Here's a site, nicely maintained. This is park, but there's no sign saying what you're looking at. So people are running across this, not understanding that it has this great connection to their history. That's looking in one direction one day, and then the other direction another day. And the Schuylkill, so it was an outlet to the Schuylkill right down there. It's just mysterious sites. The Auburn Tunnel. Imagine this with rock over top. It was a tunnel. It was daylighted in the 1850s, but it was the canal ran through this tunnel. It was the first transportation tunnel in the U.S., and it was built so it could be the first transportation tunnel in the U.S. because they really didn't have to do that. There was another route nearby where they wouldn't have had to tunnel, but they're like, hey, let's make a tunnel. So it's really an amazing spot. And right behind me is Landingville Marsh, which is a fantastic bird sanctuary. They have 77 species nesting there and 200 something that come there. And the marsh itself was the canal.
town? I don't know Landingville, I'm trying to.
It's, Landingville Marsh is between Landingville and Auburn is a little bit north of, let's see, Hamburg, Port Clinton. So yeah, it's in the upper part that was closed down before that New York Times article. So there's some stuff remaining, which is good. This also is Auburn area. This I had to trespass a bit. So it is amazing. No graffiti, no trash, just out there in the woods, fantastic. And I'm going to show like 4 pictures of it.
So it's a closed off area, that's why you had to trespass.
I had to walk the right away, I had to walk down the railway, and then I stayed really close to the river so that if it's true you can trespass near a river. I was pretty close. But right here, this is on someone's private property. Yeah, yeah, it is someone's farm. They have an animal farm. Yeah, now I'm in trouble. So
That's an interesting question. How much of the right-of-way, the eminent domain, a bunch of this, like anything else, to put it in, how much is still public property versus private property?
right. Yeah, I just was looking, a photographer friend of mine named William Williams, who teaches at Haverford College, just posted on Facebook today. He's documenting Civil War sites, and he showed this picture that looked like some of these, and it was like these stairs to nowhere kind of picture. And he said that the homes that were on this property, the ruin, the important Civil War ruin was on private property, but the houses were bought up. Now, he didn't say who bought them up, but publicly. So whether it was town of Vicksburg or the state, I don't know, it was Mississippi. And so that's something that could happen, but this is an ongoing farm that looks quite healthy, so I don't think it's going anywhere. The stonework is incredible. Some of these colors are from lichens or whatever over time. It's Pennsylvania brownstone. We have all these brownstone quarries up and down the Schuylkill, and I found a book that told about how each quarry had different color stone and described the color of the stone from each one, even if they're just a few miles apart sometimes. Okay, so that was that site. Some pictures I'm taking are about the absence of dams, and this is one. There was a dam right about up here. And then you can see some of this brownstone just lying along the bank. They had docks here for the coal boats, and when the upper part of navigation was closed, this was the head of navigation. So trains would bring it here. Plenty of trains by that time. Weedy growths, so excellent. But you can see this beautiful craftsmanship. The Transportation Museum, that's in Port Clinton, a very funky, very cool museum that has a lot of canal stuff and railroad stuff. If you're ever up in that area, just give those guys, the sign on the door says, call us, we're right down the street, and they come right over and let you in. One of those. And they were telling me it was Italian stone workers in this area, but it was also, Polish and German and other areas. And that this combing that they did on the face of ashlar blocks, and I learned the new word ashlar, which means, anybody ever heard that? Ashlar? It's means they're flat, they're squared off, rectangular, but the face is flat, as opposed to what the railroad was building. The faces of the railroad viaducts or walls or whatever were rough face. But then they put in this combing just for decoration. I love that. All right, forget what you're doing here. Okay, and nearby there's historic towpath trail. It doesn't go very far. It's not very well marked. The signs that are on it, once you're on it, are extremely ancient. Schuylkill River's over there. And then halfway up that hillside is where the Schuylkill River Trail goes. Go in the winter. The view is way better. And you're up, halfway up this mountain looking down on the river, on the town, on other mountains. Fantastic. Also, the Appalachian Trail goes right through there. And there's close up. This in Hamburg, this is north of Reading. The canal is watered, but that's stormwater and or seasonal. They ice skate on part of it if they have enough water in it and it freezes. This is the Schuylkill. And then if you continue on that, you can't get to Lock 30. It's in there. So I still have to go back and work on that one. I'm not walking past that. Just next to somebody's house. I'm standing in the canal route. Yeah, isn't that wild? Look, 33. Backyards. There are several places where I was starting to recognize what these capstones look like. That's the very top of a buried lock. This lock was more than 20 feet deep. That's its top. And you can see on the other side there. And that's a double lock, so I don't know if they combined it. Some of the double locks they combine later. But you start to see like the marks where the straps, where the iron straps were kind of holding it together. Sometimes the iron straps are still there. This one, Leesport, and we're going downriver. Charles Ellett, who is a bridge engineer, designer also. This one, Stuart and I were like screaming when we saw this because neither of us had been to it before. It was outside his territory. That it actually had water coming through it. I think that's the only one I've ever seen that has water coming through it. I haven't been to all of them yet, but some have water in them, stormwater. But that's the river coming through. Now, of course, it's missing its gates, but you can see the indentations where the gates were. It's a double lock. The other one's next to it. You can see a little bit there. So this was trespassing and bushwhacking, lots of prickers. The marks of the miter gate, the type of gate that's in a lock that opens like this. It's a miter gate. So that's very common to see in these capstones. And sometimes they have the metal and the iron still there. Private property. Private property. So aqueduct, we now know. The canal was going up along top of it and the creek passing under. Another one not far from there. Oh. Sometimes you just see the canal bed all dry. It can look distinctively like a canal sometimes, other times not so much. And you need to consult your old maps. This house, 1824, might have been a lock tender's house. They weren't there. We couldn't find out. This is a public. I mean, it's a private farm, but it's open. You can go in there, and they have informational signs all over, and it's pretty cool. Big double lock. This guy's side yard. So here are the capstones. The other side would have been over here, and then it just got mounded up at some point. And if anybody has ever seen the book, The Schuylkill Navigation, History and Photographs by Harry Rinker, that's got pictures that shows what all these sites used to look like, and it's pretty fantastic. I just want to point out that this guy was an environmentalist. This is fry oil, heating oil. He made sure we knew that. Proud of it. And then a little bit lower, he showed us how to get to this aqueduct through a little secret path past his hunting stands. And see, this aqueduct doesn't have the stonework and arches that would indicate, in this case it would indicate that was a wooden aqueduct. So it just had, that's why it's gone. So. And then one of those weird little blizzards happened whenever this was, a week ago Friday. While we were trespassing again. Vincent, not far from Here, there's the ruin of Vincent Dam. You can get to this it's on state game lands. So consult your Google and follow the Schuylkill, and you'll see where it is. And what's next to it now is one of the water monitoring stations. If you live in Philadelphia, you might recognize we also have a green one down at Fairmount. Green. This is where the lock was. The canal went right through there. The lock was right there. This got filled in during the Schuylkill River project cleanup, but that is the original lock tender's house. It's been semi-restored in a little bit odd way. The river's right down there, and I'll just next picture, down to that spot. Now, there's some of that brownstone still in the river. I can't say for sure that was part of the lock, but it's right where the lock was, and it's brownstone. On the other hand, there were quarries near there too. And it does break off in kind of these block-like. That's one reason it was valued by stoneworkers. It's like easy to quarry. This is the Walnut, what's it called? Yeah, Walnut Hill section of Valley Forge Park, on the other side of the river from the part of the park that everybody knows about. And it's a beautiful trail over there that this is a little bit hidden from. And Catfish Dam. The one lock that was at Catfish Dam, but it's a double lock. And same location, looking over to the other side where there's new condos or apartments. The abutment for the dam is you could see over here if you just drive in and park there, you can see it. Now, do we only have one person who's actually kayaked on the river past here? Do you know what was on that? Do you remember seeing some graffiti on the side of a dam in this area near Valley Forge? It's got a peace sign. It's got a peace sign on it. Do you remember the peace sign? Yeah, it's on the other side of this. That's what it used to look like. I gotta go a little faster. I see what time it is. Again, the towpath between the canal and the river. We cannot figure out what that ruin is, but it had concrete and metal, so it's 20th century. Plymouth Dam, this was just taken down. The rest of it, it was breached, but it was taken down finally 2009. And sometimes I wish I had started this, well, I do wish I had started this project before. There were 3 dams taken down in 07 and 09, and but there are pictures of them. The canal went up there. So a lot of times they get developed over. Lock 68 down near where I live, so I go to this one all the time. Used to have some water flowing into the canal, but now it's really silted completely in. And but restoration is planned for this. So this is late in happening. They were going to do some restoration up there and to be finished in 2014. It's looking the other way up towards the canal and Flat Rock Dam. Schuylkill River Trail on the right. The former R6 commuter line to the right of that. And that's what that used to look like. So the ruin of this sluice house, it's very romantic now, but it's not going to be able to be saved. Slackwater Pool, this is the end of the pool, up to Manioc, Venice Island. And then the outlet lock on Lock Street. So when you're looking for these sites, it's really good to go into towns and look for Lock Street, Canal Street, Cole Street. I mean, there are a lot of them, especially in the upper parts of the system. And then finally to Fairmount, where across here, when the snow was helping make this jump out, there are ruins. This is not that ashlar that they made locks from, but there is some up here. And I'm looking through my binoculars, and but that was where the lock and the little canal were. That's what it looked like. come along. And then a rendering of it. The Fairmount Waterworks was, the water department owns that and also built the dam. So when you look at that profile, you will not see Dam 32 Fairmount on that profile because that's the Schuylkill Navigation Company, the private company, whereas the city of Philadelphia actually built the Fairmount Dam. But you will see Lock 71. You'll see this on the profile because they built that. And then there was a bit of a like push me, pull you thing going on over water rights. There was a contract and the city was only supposed to use a certain amount of water and they were only supposed to use, but now when you go to this site, there's magnificent waterfall flowing all year round. But in those days, especially in the summer, there might not be anything flowing over the dam because it's being diverted either through the waterworks to run the pumps, those water wheels and turbines, or it would, some of it diverted through their canal. Philadelphia Museum of Art, built in 1920s up here where the reservoirs were. Then this is, what Cherry had talked about last year. So I just love this, prohibiting the pollution of the Schuylkill River. And it's a wonderful, her book is fantastic if you haven't read it. It's called A River Again. It has a lot of, primary sources and then some photographs that she's taken.
One of the books is at the, one of the books is available at the end of the day.
Oh, as a prize?
And one of the prizes.
Excellent.
Put your name in it.
Yeah. These impoundment basins, there were either 23 or 26 of them built, depending what source you're looking at. And they're now being turned back into, many of them, into parks and wetlands being encouraged inside of them. And so one really great one to go look at is Black Rock Sanctuary in Phoenixville, just outside Phoenixville, and it's got all interpretive trails. But there are a lot of these parks. The one in Valley Forge is there's a trail along the top of the berm. It's great because you can walk on the top of the berm, see the river on one side in the winter, and then see into where there's wetlands. But this is what it was originally used for, was getting the coal waste out of the river, letting it settle to the bottom, getting the clean water back in, and then recycling that coal waste. And that silt that piles up behind dams, huge problem. The river can't clean itself. And then you get these weird land masses happening. So this is our silt island, that's what we call it, who live and work around there. That was formed mainly only because the dam is right here. And now they're making like a boardwalk park through there, and they pulled out invasive species, and I don't know if they're going to replant right in that area. I guess so. Still working on it. So the Schuylkill River project was hugely beneficial in terms of allowing the river to clean itself. Before the Clean Water Act, it was, again, underappreciated, and Cherry's book is really important. So, kudos for all of that, but they were not thinking about historic preservation at all. So it was, the infrastructure of the Schuylkill navigation was dismantled and buried. And just as, I've been showing you, so that's been partially overcome in some places, but the idea of like actually digging down and freeing up one of those locks to see what's under there, that's hugely expensive, and sometimes they're on private property. Here's what I can tell. This is not completed. There are a couple of TBDs on there, but what we have left. I mean, there's a lot left, and these are desilting, but these are all from the Schuylkill navigation. So there are undoubtedly more aqueducts. That's just all I've found so far. And then quickly, the last few slides. Some of the signs that are occurring at some of the sites along the Schuylkill River Trail. 5 minutes, okay, good. Okay, see the red arrow? This person has reclaimed one of our signs. But he is on the Schuylkill navigation. This is a slackwater pool, it's Schuylkill navigation, so. Excellent signage. If anybody here was responsible for this, fantastic. Historic picture, old map, how a lock works, how does the lock work, you know, photograph of the part you can't see that's below you, and so forth. And that's where this is. So that's the lock, double lock, and the canal heading off into the woods. But they need a little parking area because I had to park down there. Guess it's just for the cyclists, that's okay. Miter gate tracks, but they put in benches and planted flowers in it. Another sign. That's nice to see the old photographs on these signs. I appreciated this one. This is one of the old water trail maps, but they made it into a sign, and I appreciated that. It says remnants. Oh yes, I'll go find it. A sign that this is not my photography. That's how faded it really is. So that needs replacement. But this is, you know, some of these areas, they are open to the public, but they're like kind of secret anyway. The previous one was on this site, Phoenixville Dam, so this lock is, you know, in good shape. But unfortunately, a lot of places where they're going to allow the public in, they put these cyclone fences around the locks, which is really a shame. I get it, though. Or you have signage that the whole area is neglected, overgrown, graffitied. Signs might be a little faded. This is a really good sign. It's getting faded. That's at this site. And I just put these 4 up here for those of you from this area because it's really close. It's across the river. And it's a really nice park, Towpath Park. And then finally, back to Lock 68 and the incredible graffiti and so on that's happening here. There is something in the works, but they're going to have to take this down. We will not save the brick sluice house. Hopefully they can save these gears and so on. But, you know, leaving a terrible mess. This is really the only one I ran across that was like this. And it's odd because it's right next to the trail. However, when they get down here, nobody can really see them. And then there's this. And funny, this beaver or beavers, they've been working all winter, knocking these trees down in this spot that makes no sense beaver-wise. So I think they're just going to eat them. I don't know. They don't need a dam. It's already calm water. It's not a lodge because that would be out in the water, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't know that much about beavers. Somebody can correct me, but
You can spell it into the water so that the food is in the water and they can swim and get the twigs.
Thank you.
They live in the banks.
Thank you. Well, they're not measuring their trees very well because the tree fell on top of the sluice wall, and so it's not in the water. But it is almost in the exact spot that the water department wants to put in a diversion wall. So this is the start of our diversion wall. Yeah. Anybody who wants to see these places, I lead tours. And then also, if there are any geocachers in the audience, go get them. They're at these dam sites. They've been there a couple years. And credits and so forth. And thank you very much. I'm sorry I went so long. What we can do is, since it's lunchtime, if anybody has questions or wants to talk about this more and any aspect of it, just have lunch with me or grab me whenever. I'll be here all day. Okay. Thank you.